crucial part about these submarines, just a short crash course for our listeners and viewers, is that this gives you guaranteed second strike ability.
Yes.
Because these submarines are extremely difficult to track.
Aridhaman is the most powerful combatant that India has ever built. It's a 7,000-ton ballistic missile submarine, which means it displaces more than 7,000 tons. It carries 8 SLBMs, sea-launched ballistic missiles.
It's the one that can stay underwater very long. It moves very fast, carries usually conventional missiles, and is basically a fighting arm of the Navy.
The most powerful weapon of war that India has ever built. It's very rare for the Navy chiefs to speak about the SSBNs of the Arihant class, and I think this reflects a growing confidence in the Indian military about our capabilities, where India's space is in the world.
Welcome to Inner Defense. I am very, very excited about the topic that we're going to discuss on this episode. It's one where I get to pick my guest Sandeep Unnithan's brains on a subject on which he's known in the country to be the go-to expert, and that is submarines, especially nuclear submarines. Though if you ask Sandeep, he thinks there's only one kind of submarines, those are nuclear submarines. There are no other kind of submarines. Everything else, diesel powered, electric, whatever, is for him a submersible, without any offense to his friends in the Navy. Right, Sandeep?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Dave. You nailed it.
Yeah. We've talked about nuclear submarines previously, nuclear-powered attack submarines, the SSNs that the Navy dreamt is the wrong word, but considering they haven't arrived, dreaming is perhaps the right word. But the Navy thought of having around 2 decades ago. The plan was that it set the ball rolling for that, but never seen the light of day till today. Even now, the deal that was supposed to be signed between Maasgau Docks Limited and the German group has not yet.
That's the conventional boats.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're talking
sorry. I got confused. Yeah. Those are different. Those are different. The SEN project is on track, but hasn't really seen the light of day.
It's going to take a couple of more years.
And which is why it's very crucial for our listeners and viewers to refer to that episode because it will give you some good background to what we're about to discuss on this episode. This is the ballistic submarines, the nuclear-powered ballistic submarines, basically submarines that are capable and able to carry nuclear-tipped missiles and basically stay out at sea. And
ballistic missile submarines, yes.
The crucial part about these submarines, just a short crash course for our listeners and viewers, is that this gives you guaranteed second strike ability.
Yes.
Because these submarines are extremely difficult to track, and you can. It's a given that once out at sea, people will not know where they are.
Right.
They can just slumber around and underwater and then launch their missiles when ordered to. Which is very crucial, especially for a country like India with the stated no first use policy, with the policy that says that if somebody fires at us, we will wreak havoc to that particular nation. And for that, you need this ability. Why are we talking about this though? The Navy chief in his annual press conference held just yesterday said that the third Indian-made nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, INS Aridhaman, will be commissioned very soon. It'll probably be in a few months. This is after INS Arihant, which was commissioned last year, late 2024, and INS Arihant, the main boat of this class, which was commissioned in 2016 after being launched in 2009 under the UPA government. We've kind of, Sandeep, talked about the difference from the nuclear-powered attack submarine, which is basically like you've said in the previous episode, it's a fighter jet of sorts. It's the one that can stay underwater very long. It moves very fast, carries usually conventional missiles, and is basically a fighting arm of the Navy. While the ballistic...
It's part of the conventional Navy.
While this is a strategic asset that you have, which is used primarily to launch nuclear weapons.
It's part of the Strategic Forces Command, the SFC.
Yes, exactly. So before we talk about the program, Sandeep, very innocuous name, by the way, Advanced Technological Vessel. It's just very safe sounding, I think.
There's a reason for that. We'll
come to that. So before we talk about the project, like its inception and its history, want to talk about the significance of INS Aridhaman in the first place.
Right.
Third, in our tally, and some with reference to two things. One, something that came up in my research, the term that is known as CASD, continuous at sea deterrent.
Right.
This is something that is practiced by the US and the UK navies. In fact, the Royal Navy is supposed to have had one nuclear submarine out at sea in the last 6 decades.
Yeah.
At least one. The patrol is basically 24/7, 365 days. So essentially, both the countries have one nuclear submarine out at sea at all times, no matter what. This actually gives you the guaranteed second strike ability. So how many submarines do you need to get this ability? Where is India right now? That's point number one. Point number two is the significance of the Navy chief actually talking about it. Because apart from INS Arihant, which was obviously a grand thing, a grand development that you made, so you wanted to tell the world that you have this ability. Apart from Arihant, you haven't talked about nuclear submarines at all. In fact, Arigat was launched very quietly. There was just one ceremony where Rajnath Singh commissioned the submarine, but not a single photo of Arigat, by the way.
Right.
And even Arihant itself, I think the official photos are just 2 or 3, including one where...
Just two photographs.
Just two
official photographs.
Including one where Gurcharan Kaur, the wife of the then PM Manmohan Singh, cracked a coconut on the hull of the submarine. And even that photo is not full, by the way. You don't see the entire submarine. So secretive. But here you have a Navy chief talking about the submarine at a press conference, talking about it before it is commissioned. Significance of that, and yes, the significance of us getting a third nuclear ballistic.
Right. Well, Dev, the Aridhaman is the most powerful combatant that India has ever built. It's a 7,000-ton ballistic missile submarine, which means it displaces more than 7,000 tons. It carries 8 SLBMs, sea-launched ballistic missiles, and it carries as many nuclear-tipped missiles as the Arihant and the Arihant combined. So the Arihant has 4 missiles, nuclear-tipped. The Arihant has 4 missiles, nuclear-tipped. I'm not going into the smaller ones, the K-15s. I'm looking at the big ones, the K-4s. The Arihant carries 4 K-4s. The Arihant carries 4 K-4s. The Aridhaman carries 8 K-4s. So if you look at it in terms of deterrence, it's a very big number. Because this point about deterrence that you made, CASD, continuous at-sea deterrence, is something that it means that at any given point, you have a certain number of nuclear warheads away from the mainland. So which means that when one of the Arihant class submarines sails out on patrol, nobody knows where the Arihant is, it will be deemed that there are so many X number of warheads that have sailed out of the Indian mainland, nobody knows where they are. So no adversary can launch a surprise attack against your cities or your population centers or your military targets, because there will be an assured retaliation. And this is part of the India's nuclear doctrine. So that is the significance of this. And it is, in terms of its displacement, in terms of its complexity, its the number of missiles it carries, it is the most powerful weapon of war that India has ever built.
Right. And the point about the Navy chief openly talking about this.
Very unusual. I was there at the press conference on the 2nd of December when he said it. It was a question that was asked to him about the commissioning of this. And he he took it front foot, played it out. He said, yes, the Aridhaman it will be commissioned very soon. And I think it's very rare for the Navy chiefs to speak about the SSBNs of the Arihant class. And I think this reflects a growing confidence in the Indian military about our capabilities, where India's place is in the world. You mentioned that thing about the ATV program. Why is it given such an innocuous name? It was given an innocuous name simply because it was a stealth program, right? It was a black program. It was a secret program. It was something that we wanted to keep under wraps for the longest time. This program began in the late 60s, 67. And it continued through the 70s and 80s. You're looking at a third world country which is trying to develop its own nuclear weapons program, and also platforms like aircraft, ballistic missiles like the Agni series and the Arihant class nuclear submarines. Now, we wanted to make sure that these were all kept under wraps, because the minute you announce that you have a ballistic missile submarine program, that very clearly tells the rest of the world that you have a nuclear weapons program as well. Let's not forget the fact that in the 70s, our bombs were in the basement. We never brought them out. We never told anyone that we had intentions of becoming a nuclear weapons state. So precisely for this reason is why the ATV nomenclature was coined. It was so innocuous, nobody would even imagine. Advanced technology vessel, it could be anything, right? And if you go back into history, the Manhattan Project, for instance, it was named by General Leslie Groves. And if, for those of you who've watched Oppenheimer, that's the character that's played by Matt Damon. And he gave that program a name called the Manhattan Project because his unit was in the Manhattan district. So it was innocuous names like this. Military, very, very high technology strategic programs are usually couched in these kind of nomenclature. A, you don't even reveal the existence of it. There's very little documentation of it that's kept. And B, you make the program sound as harmless as possible, as routine, mundane, everyday, something like... so one of the scientists was telling me that, we made a mistake when we released a picture of a missile called the Sagarika. And this was the dawn of the internet. Everybody went ballistic, literally, because that was the first acknowledgement that we had a ballistic missile program, an SLBM program. They had a picture of the launcher. And so they had to keep changing the name of the program and the missiles. And because, what happens is that it's like a magnet, right? You put a magnet out there and it then
attracts all the attention.
It attracts attention. The entire Indian nuclear weapons program is about stealth, keeping things below the radar, very little documentation of that. For a reason, because we are operating in an environment of very high technology denial regimes. The minute they know that you have a ballistic missile submarine program, then they will try and curtail technologies. They'll say, let's not give them this because they're trying to develop this. So that's how the world is. It's a very cruel world. And even countries that pretend to be your technology partners and all that, they'll give you all these nomenclatures, strategic partnerships and all that. All the other countries except the Russian Federation, they are the ones who will not give you anything. They will not even sell you, machines. CNC machines will not be sold to you because they suspect, this is going to be used for your strategic program. So that's how our program is kind of, been instilled.
In fact, Russian help was crucial for this program to the extent of India learning or developing the ability of miniaturizing the nuclear reactors, which is something I think Sandeep will get to as we now get to the inception of this program and how it's progressed over the years. No matter what I do, this one name comes up in my research when I talk about nuclear submarines. That's P.N. Haksar.
Right.
And a famous memo that he wrote that sort of build the foundations of what's to be India, how India sees its nuclear weapons, how India develops its nuclear weapons. And it will be very surprising. It was very surprising for me when I first read it, and it will be very surprising to people who haven't, that this clarity of thought that for India to be a true nuclear weapons power, you would always need a nuclear powered ballistic missile submarine was there back then in the 60s. So who was this gentleman, P.N. Haksar? What was this memo all about? Tell us about this memo, the inception of this program and how it's progressed over the years.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Dev, because, Haksar is a far-sighted man, a visionary, and an IFS officer. He was very close to Mrs. Gandhi. He was like a quasi-national security advisor to Mrs. Gandhi. And in the late 60s is when he is drafted this, and we know it thanks to some declassified documents a few years back, which, just to cut the long story short, the Haksar memo actually puts out the fact that this comes out just 3 years after China has tested the bomb. And China tested the bomb just 2 years after the 1962 war with India. And we've gone over this in previous episodes of your program, where we've discussed why India had to go nuclear because of the Chinese threat, that you were faced with a country on your borders, a hostile country that had tested nuclear weapons. Haksar puts it down in that memo of his, which is our version of the long telegram, George Kennan's long telegram that he wrote to the United States at the start of the so-called Cold War. And Haksar very clearly identifies the fact that we need to have a nuclear triad if we are to counter China. And that is a troika of land, sea, and air-based weapons. Yeah. So we, of course, as we tested in Pokhran and then, of course, Pokhran 2, we got the air vectors and the land-based missiles, the Agni series. The sea-based deterrent, which is the Arihant class, was the most complex one because, as you know, there's just 5 countries in the world have mastered the technology of a nuclear-powered submarine, which is basically a nuclear reactor, a compact nuclear reactor, which can fit into the hull of a submarine. It's about a 10 diameter hull, a little bigger than a 1-story building. You have to compact a reactor that will fit in that environment, and it has to be, ruggedized, marinized. It has to, withstand all kinds of shocks. So to do something like that, only 5 countries have done it. And the last country before India's leap with the INS Arihant in 2009 and then, of course, 2016 was the PLA, China.
PLA
and
Navy.
The PLA Navy launched the submarine in the early 1970s, 72 if I recall correctly. The Long March is what they launched then. And since then, there has been complete silence for almost half a century until India starts entering the party. So we are one of the last countries to enter this very exclusive club of countries that have these ballistic missile firing submarines. And you mentioned this point of CASD, continuous at sea deterrent.
Okay.
That is that you need to have a minimum number of nuclear powered submarines, a small fleet, of which one will always be out at sea on CASD, which means that an adversary will not surprise you, will not strike at you. And that number, we believe, is 4. I have no access to any information other than the numbers of submarines that are under construction.
Yes.
There are 4 Indian submarines in the water. The third one is, Aridhaman is the third. And there will be a 4th one after that, which is the yet unnamed S4 star.
Yeah.
And once that comes into the water, we will have a certain number of warheads out at sea, which can go out at sea, and a certain number of platforms like SSBNs, which means that out of these 4, one will be out on patrol at any given point. And that allows us to enhance the robustness of our second strike capability. So Haksar saw all this in the late 60s. And in that memo of his, he mentions with very great clarity that till the time we don't threaten China with a retaliatory strike, and he's always presuming the fact that the Chinese will attack us first, and we need to attack them after that, a second strike capability, and we need to deter them from attacking us, right? You're looking at a young democracy that's faced up against a Chinese Communist Party dictatorship, and that was the kind of existential threat that the political leadership of the 60s faced, and that has been continued from the 60s. Government after government has come. The ATV files remain with the PMO. It's one of our most classified programs. Very few people are allowed into that facility. And it was only in 2009 that we actually, for the first time, the government of India acknowledged that it had a program like this. They launched the submarine. Those 2 photographs were released. I was one of those fortunate, privileged few who was there on the dockyard when it was, when the waters were flooded and the submarine was, lifted off its chocks. And that was 26th of July, 2009. And we also saw a very important admission over there by the Prime Minister of the day, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. And I was surprised because as I looked down that dockyard, we saw it's a dry dock.
Yeah.
So basically the submarine is there in the dry dock. And then the water is filled in and the submarine then floats up.
Right.
Towards the end of the dockyard, we saw rows and rows of Russian specialists. And these were the guys who had helped us build it. They were project consultants. And I remember the Prime Minister turning and thanking the Russians for the assistance that they had given. So, this is a very special relationship, Dev. And I can't explain it, in words almost. It is a relationship like no other. You have Indian delegations going to the former Soviet Union, and they're saying that, we want a Charlie class. They'll say, no, take a Victor class. And these are nuclear powered attack submarines. These are the deadliest platforms that are ever designed and built. And you have a very great sense of camaraderie between the two countries from the Soviet times, which has continued into the times of the Russian Federation. You have President Putin coming here, you will see more of that. Yeah. So the Russians did help us a lot with the design aspects because they had already reached the pinnacle of designing this kind of technology. I mean, the Americans, there are only two poles when it comes to nuclear submarines. There is the American pole and there is the Russian Federation, right? And the Americans give it to their allies, like the Brits.
Yes.
The French, of course, are a smaller pole, but they're on their own. They do their own stuff. The Chinese have kind of also learnt on their own, and today, they are where they are. They have 6+ ballistic missile submarines. We have 4 of a smaller kind, and we will have bigger ones in the 2030s and onwards.
So tell me about the program as much as you can. Like you said, it's highly classified. I'm going to compare it, not compare it per se, but I'm going to take the reference of the Tejas program. And another high-tech effort where you developed a fighter jet, which is not very easy thing to do.
Yes.
We know a lot about Tejas. We know there were controversies. We know the Air Force was very much against it initially, then sort of came around to it.
Yeah.
And we know about the delays, the infamous delays that still continue till this day. Yeah. We don't know a lot about the ATV project. We don't know if there were any controversies. We don't know if there were any delays. We don't know if there were any tech challenges. There is something I read online, a very vague reference. I could not actually get time to read up more about it. Maybe you must have heard of it. There was some tiff or some issue between the Department of Atomic Energy and the Indian Navy regarding this project. So in your research that you've done over the years, how much can you tell us about the project itself and whether it was just all hunky-dory, smooth sailing?
Never. It was never
was it a messy project?
Smooth sailing. I can assure you that. It was it's a long, complicated, process. It's a big program that's run like from the 60s. Now, the Haksar memo, the Haksar document was just a statement of intent, right? It was nothing more than a so-called nuclear hawk.
Like mujhe chahiye.
And I want it. And it takes you, almost half a century to get there, right? The entire 20th century passes. You lay the steel for you cut the steel on the INS Arihant in 1998, in the year of your nuclear tests. And that is almost 3 decades after Haksar has written that paper, and we have tested nuclear weapons. We've come out of the closet, so-called closet. But the program actually begins somewhere in the 60s, of course, with a reactor program. And it always starts as a naval propulsion reactor program. So it's very innocuous. I want to develop a diesel engine. I can choose to put it into a tank, or I can choose to put it into a passenger bus or into some kind of an application. But it starts with the engine, the reactor. And that is how this naval propulsion reactor picks up in BARC. And it goes through the 70s and the 80s. In the 80s is interestingly it's a milestone in the program, because in 1984 you have the program formally launched, where the Soviets agreed to help us in the program. You have, in 1981, you have Ogarkov, the Soviet defense minister, who visits. And of course, you have in the background, you have one of the most influential people in the Soviet Union, who's the father of the Soviet Navy, Admiral Sergei Gorshkov. He's been the Navy chief for almost 4 decades. There's been no naval chief with that kind of a tenure. And Gorshkov is an interesting guy because he is the Russian equivalent of Hyman Rickover, Admiral Rickover. He's the guy who got the Americans their nuclear navy. I mean, Rickover is a legend. He's been, again, half a century plus. He's headed the nuclear submarine building programs of the United States. Gorshkov is someone who loves India, unqualified love and admiration, and under his guidance, and of course the larger Soviet leadership, they decide to help India with its nuclear submarine program. 84 is when it formally starts. You have the first DG-ATV. That's when the coinage happens, with this very quiet, innocuous program begins. It's headed by Vice Admiral Mickey Roy, M.N. Roy, one of the most enigmatic naval admirals, the most uncelebrated naval admirals that we've ever had. I've had the honor of meeting him several occasions, and he was the star of this book, Operation X. He's a naval spy master, the ideal person to launch a nuclear-powered submarine program. Quiet, below the radar. Never told his left hand what his right hand was up to, that kind of guy. 84, it picks up. There are, as you mentioned, there were several disagreements on the kind of propulsion to use for the reactor. We weren't getting anywhere. But in the 1990s, when Pokhran happens, the program picks up speed. The reactor design is finally, we zero in on a reactor, which is about 83 megawatts, which corresponds to the reactor of the Chakra 1, which is a nuclear-powered attack submarine that we leased from the Soviet Union between 1987 and 1990 for about 3 years. Now, the Chakra is an interesting attack submarine. It's got this reactor, compact 83 megawatt reactor, which we then decide to use for the Arihant class. So in 1998, the Arihant is, the steel cutting begins. The design is thanks to a lot of assistance from the Russian Federation. And this relationship actually picks up speed under President Putin in 2000 on, where there's design consultancy. So there's a common myth that the Soviets built the submarines for us or the Russians built the submarine for us. No, absolutely not. We built the submarine ourselves. The design is a Russian design, which we then kind of adapted. We built our own. We tinkered with the design. So if you see the Arihant and the Arihant, they are of one class. The Aridhaman and the yet to be named S4 star, it's called S4 star. I'll tell you why it's called the S4 star. It's an interesting story. These are of a separate class. So it's like the Arihant is about 6,000 tons. The Aridhaman and the sister ship are about 7,000 tons plus, primarily because it has 4 more missiles. So they've added one more section. It's a slightly bigger SSBN. And the program picks up speed in in the 2000s. It is launched by 2009. That's about 9 years from the steel being cut. But it takes years after that. So it's by the time the submarine actually goes into patrol, it is 2018. It's 2 decades. And that tells you how complex nuclear-powered submarines are. And they're incredibly complex platforms. They have all kinds of pipes, fittings, pressure valves. There's a reactor. It's a steamship, actually. So what a nuclear-powered submarine is, for the benefit of our viewers, very simply, it's a controlled nuclear reaction in that nuclear reactor, which boils water to very high temperatures, creates superheated steam, and that steam drives a turbine, which then drives the propeller, right? That's as simply as I can put it. So it's basically a steamship, right? But a very sophisticated one at that. And that is why I call the Arihant program India's most complex scientific technological achievement, right? It is absolutely a breakthrough moment for our defense industrial complex. And tragically, I think that the secrecy that we've put this program under has kind of camouflaged a lot of our achievements in this. Where, secrecy exists for a time, for a particular purpose, when you're a struggling nation, when you're under global sanctions. But once you've now arrived to a certain thing, you're almost acknowledged as a nuclear weapons power. You're not part of the P5, but you can, trade in nuclear. You can be part of the nuclear commerce, and you can buy uranium for your reactors, all of that, because of the civil nuclear deal. It is time to come out and claim ownership of this program, which is remarkable. The kind of breakthroughs that we have done in this, the kind of design stuff that we've done, we are fully capable today, I believe. This information comes from a lot of the people who worked on the program. They're fully capable of designing our own submarines. Whether it's a bigger version of the Arihant class like the S5, which is a 13,500 ton submarine. And to give our viewers an idea of how big the S5 is, that these are the bigger submarines that will join, which are under construction now, which will be inducted in the 2030s. It's 13,000 tons plus, which is almost more than double the size of the Arihant. And it would be a little smaller than our first aircraft carrier. In terms of displacement. That's how big and complex these platforms are. So it is a phenomenal achievement. And the other great thing about this, Dev, is that, the fact is that we've managed to bring down the indigenization or the import components to this, right down to almost 80%
Yes.
in the last 2 boats, right? So when you talk about Atmanirbhar
20%
Bharat, you're just importing all about a
20%.
little over 20% of the. When you're talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, the ATV program is Atmanirbhar from its inception.
Yeah.
You assume that you're going to be up against high technology, denial regimes. So you have to, improvise. You have to create that defense ecosystem within the country. You have to look for private guys who can do it. Create industries. Literally, industries have sprung up around us. Last count, there were 500 industries who support the ATV program. I mean, these are almost. It's got an entire ecosystem of its own.
Yeah.
Just the way the Maruti 800 was, again using that automobile analogy, the way the Maruti 800 was for India's automobile sector in the 80s. The ATV, the Arihant has been for our submarine ecosystem. That the entire thing. You have companies that have built pressure valves or doing reactor vessels. You have companies, private sector companies like L&T that were making pressure hulls. They were welding because of their expertise in welding. Steel. They were brought in to do the pressure hulls of the Arihant class. All of those things. And so when you read this, you said, hey, Atmanirbhar Bharat is not a slogan now that we came up against. We've always had this. So when you're looking at high technology strategic programs like the Arihant class, there is no way to go but Atmanirbhar.
Yeah.
When it comes to tactical, platforms like say fighter jets and tanks and missiles and assault rifles, even then you're a little more laid back. So you kind of resort to imports. So now I think the biggest thing in the government's mind is that why can't we have more programs like the Arihant class that can actually drive indigenous design, indigenous innovation, build up our own indigenous military industrial complex.
It's a very good point about the need to document the history of this program, and I think in fact you'd be the perfect person to write that history. So perhaps you should talk to your friends in the Navy or in the
not enough documents about this. It's a very closely guarded thing.
No, what I meant was speak to them and convince them of the need to document this. And
I must mention there is a very interesting book that's due out on this. There's Rear Admiral Sudarshan Srikhande, the naval scholar. His PhD thesis, which was on India's nuclear submarine program, is due out, as a book, and that is a book I'm really waiting to read.
Interesting.
Because it will actually exactly what you mentioned. It will have, it will be the go-to compendium for a lot of open source literature on our nuclear submarine program, written by a few people. I mean, like me and a few others who've documented this. So he's put it together, and it's a fantastic narrative from what I've read of it. It gives a whole, the logic of the SSB and why we have it, and where the program is headed, and beautifully analyzed things. So that's a book to watch out for.
Right. We'll talk more about this, but after a quick break.
Let's start from Delhi. What cars did you all take? What route did you all take? Why did you all take it? Run us through it.
Well, we took 2 Mahindras. I think the best Mahindras.
4x4s?
Yes, the best Mahindras to take for the job. Any guesses?
I know. So
The Thar Rocks and the Scorpio N, both in the top of the line automatic 4x4 diesel.
Automatics,
trims.
huh?
Yeah, automatics. And we drove from Delhi. We went through Chandigarh. We went to Manali. We crossed the Atal Tunnel. And from Manali, we went straight to Hanle.
which
We
is
did
how
not
long
go-
a drive?
It wasn't very long. I mean, I think
How many kilometers is it?
400, I think.
Yeah, that's significant, dude.
Yeah. I mean, we took that decision because, most people go to Leh for most things in Ladakh. But we wanted to go to Hanle because, it's just 50 kilometers from where you can reach Migla. Like, it'll be a easier and, more
No, I don't
approachable
think it's
base.
possible also to travel from Leh to Hanle and then travel back on the same day.
Yeah.
What's the road
it's
like?
pushing it. It's pushing.
I've done that road. I think it's one
really
of the
pushing
most beautiful, that as you exit that, what is that Vive point called?
The one in Chumathang?
Shea. After,
Oh, yeah.
at Shea you take the Y point
Yes.
and you turn towards the Indus, and then that road running along the Indus is
It's
just
beautiful, truly beautiful.
And then it's like beyond that point, there's a right turn over Chumathang.
Yeah, that goes to Pangong.
Which
far as I'm aware.
route did y'all take? Did y'all take the
To go to Hanle?
yeah?
No, so we went, we crossed Baralachla. We went ahead and we got to Debring. We took a right from Debring, the road that goes to So Moriri. And we crossed Puga. And then we joined that road. And then
so
we took a
basically
right
y'all
and
didn't
reached
move
Hanle.
towards Leh at all.
Yeah, no.
So y'all
We just
turned off
cut
at
across the
Debring,
entire thing.
Puga,
Yeah.
which by the way is hot springs, and there we have some epic footage of it.
yeah.
We'll put it up on screen.
Nice,
It's
beautiful yaks.
yaks, the hot springs,
Hot
the
springs as
geysers,
well.
Those were
So we reached Hanle.
Welcome back. Before the break, Sandeep, you referred to the next submarine in this project, that is the S4 Star. I've always been meaning to ask you, where the hell is S1? I mean, Arihant is S2 apparently.
Right.
Arigat was S3. Aridhaman, which will get commissioned in a couple of months, is S4, and the upcoming one is S4 Star. One, where is S1? Second, why not S5 and why S4 Star?
Right.
What is this?
Okay, good question. So S1 is the shore-based reactor in Kalpakkam.
Ah, okay.
So there is an identical 83 megawatt shore-based test reactor, which is in Kalpakkam in the DAE premises. And it looks, there's just been one photograph of it released by the DAE, Department of Atomic Energy, which is, it looks like a section of the, it's the reactor compartment of the submarine, where they actually, this reactor, which is the toughest thing to get actually, because without a reactor, without a nuclear powered reactor, a submarine is just steel, right? It's a conventional submarine, it's submersible, right? So this is what they had to perfect first. So while the Arihant design was being worked upon and steel cutting had begun, the DA, the BARC had already, its reactor division had figured this S1 prototype thing at Kalpakkam. And that was where all the testing was done and they perfected it. And then they serial produced it. So S2 is Arihant, INS Aridhaman. S stands for submarine. So submarine 1 is your shore-based reactor. S2 is, of course, the Arihant. S3 is the Arihant. And S4 is the Aridhaman, the to be commissioned. Now, this program was supposed to have just 3 submarines. It was to be terminated at Aridhaman, right? There would not be an S4 Star. Now, what happened is that when these 3 submarines were being constructed, the strategic community within our the politico-military leadership, they felt that these submarines were insufficient in size and most importantly, the missile ranges. So it's all about, see, submarines are of course just the platform. At the end of the day, they have a utility. They have a strategic utility. What do they carry? They carry the missiles. Do they carry adequate missiles to ensure a survivable second strike option? And that is when they felt that these current 3 submarines were not adequate, and therefore they went to a new project called the S5. So when S4, that is Aridhaman, was completed, they would go on to a new number project series called the S5, which is the submarine that I mentioned, the 13,500 ton submarine, which is larger displacement, twice the displacement of the Arihant.
It's nearly like the US submarines.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly like the Ohio.
This one actually, if you look up the size reference, Arihant is puny compared to
it is what
US
we I call in one of my pieces a baby boomer.
Baby boomer.
Yeah, it's it's the world's smallest ballistic missile submarine, and I think it's a measure of our technological capability that we did not at that time in the 90s.
Demonstration.
We didn't have the ability to build a submarine that was bigger than 6,000 or 7,000 tons. And let's not forget that we are a country that had built exactly 2 submarines, right? And that were assembled submarines. We never designed our own submarines. When the Arihant when we cut the steel on the Arihant in 98, we had built exactly 2 submarines. We had assembled 2 small German submarines of about less than 2,000 tons, right? So this was a big leap for us then. Now we're going on to the next level, S5. And S5 will I believe, have about 4 units, exactly like the Arihant class. So when the S5 started construction, the project was sanctioned. That project got going. That is when the DRDO said, hey, listen, we could build a 4th submarine because our yard is going to be idle after the 3rd submarine comes out. And that is when this additional sanction. Yes.
Number nahi bacha hai. Star maar do.
Star Mardo, yeah. So that's how it came out. So you couldn't call it S5 because you have a separate line. So they said, okay, S4, and after S4, there'll be S4. They put an asterisk on it, S4 star. So it's actually called the S4 star. And that is going to be the last submarine of this class. And then you will, of course, go on to no one knows what the S4 star is called yet. There is a name, but it's not out in the public domain.
Do you know it?
I don't know it. I'm just guessing. But if you look at it, it will have to begin with ARI.
Yes, exactly.
It has to be an ARI series. So for those of you watching there, you could probably, respond in the comments.
Suggest names,
exactly. They're all Sanskrit names. So it's Arihant, it's Aridhaman, it's Arighat. And Ari, of course, means
enemy. Yeah.
So it will have to be Ari something.
Yeah. So Arihant, by the way, is the destroyer of enemies. Arighat is a slaughterer of enemies.
Yes.
Aridhaman is the suppressor of enemies.
Yeah.
So let's see what S4 star will be.
Yeah.
Right. Sandeep, last major point on this episode, before I move to some trivia questions as well, is like you were talking about the missiles. Because we talk about the submarine, but that's just half the story.
Yeah.
Right? It's the missiles that they carry that ensure distraction. They will also need to be developed. They will also need some extra development because you're not launching them from, dropping them from air, which is quite simple. You're not launching them from land, which you've developed and mastered because you have a great rocket force anyway. You're launching this from sea, and these kind of submarines I would guess deep underwater, so they'll have to travel that part perhaps without getting detected, surface, and then sort of
no, they don't surface. They fire it from under the water.
No, I'm talking about the missiles. The missiles will have to surface and then go to space and come down. So the K series, tell us about the missiles that we have right now, what's under development, and what is so specially happening in the Bay of Bengal that you have 4 Chinese spy vessels there. There's a lot of chatter online about, what kind of missile is India testing, and the fact that it's happening off the coast of Vizag leads people to think it's probably a submarine fired missile. But anyway, let's talk about the K series of missiles that we have. What do we have and what are we developing?
So we started with the K-15, which is now called B-05 because the name got leaked out, and it was first called the Sagarika, then it became the K-15. Now it's called the B-05 after one of the project director's birthdays.
Interesting.
It's B stands for the name of the project director of the ATV, and 05 is his birthday, which is the 5th of January. So all those people out there, you know who that is. It's a secret name. I'm not going to put his name out here, but the fact is that it started as a 750 kilometer range missile, a K-15, and it's a very interesting missile. It's a aeroballistic missile, which is a maneuvering ballistic missile, approaching near hypersonic speed. So it's the Arihant class carries 12 of them, but the problem is that they are short range. They're very capable missiles, but they're only 750 kilometers range. And if you look at it, the rest of the world, to give you an idea where we are in vis-a-vis the rest of the world with our SSBNs, these are the missile ranges that we have with the K4 and the K5 is something that the Russian Federation, with the Soviet Union and the Americans started feeling in the 1960s. So they have like more than a half century lead over the rest of the world, and indeed India. So we started with the K-15, and we quickly realized that, look, 750 is not going to be enough, because 750 will mean that you will have to close the adversary's coast to attack any targets of high value. And let's not forget that these are political platforms. These are not weapons of war fighting. These will not be deployed in any conventional attack or any of those kind of things. These are purely meant for nuclear war fighting, and we hope that day never comes. They're essentially political tools. They're instruments of political signaling, instruments of deterrence, instruments of planting the seed of doubt in the adversary's mind that if I try and launch a first strike, there will be a second strike coming at me from various places from under the sea. And that is what the Arihant class is supposed to do. So we moved up the ladder very gradually. From the K-15, we went up to the K-4, which is an early Polaris ranged missile. Polaris is the missile that equipped the George Washington class, an early ballistic missile program, submarine program of the United States. And this was about 3,500 kilometers. And then you move up to the K-5. Now, the K-5 is when we will start getting to some respectable SLBM launch capability. It's about 5,000 kilometers. Right. I have no information about what missile is being tested in the Bay of Bengal, but looking at the range, that the notification that was issued, the NOTAM, suggests that it was a missile, possibly a submarine-launched ballistic missile of about 5,000 kilometers, and that could only mean one missile, which is the K-5. And the K-5 is the final evolution of these, the K-15, K-series missiles. The K-15, the K-4, the K-5. You top it at about 5,000 kilometers plus. The K-5 is believed to be MIRVed, which means that it will have more than one warhead. It will have multiple warheads. We don't know how many. It'll be more than one, which means that when the Arihant class boats sail out, and these can all be, the K-5 can be carried by all boats, right? So the Arihant will carry 4, the Ghat will carry 4, the Aridhaman will carry 8. The S-4 Star will carry 8. So that increases the number of nuclear weapons that you can take out to sea.
That's a lot of nuclear weapons. Man.
It will, it will be all. It all depends on how many weapons are there and how many warheads
Especially
are there.
because each missile can have multiple warheads.
Multiple warheads. So the MIRV thing is really important. And that is why the K-5 is so important. And that is the reason why I believe that the Chinese surged all their so-called oceanographic research vessels into the in the vicinity of the Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean region, to pick up these missile trajectories, signatures, splashdown points, analysis of all of that, to build up their library, their threat library. The Chinese do it. Everyone does it in the world. Yeah. So the final thing of the K-6 will not be in the Arihant class. It will actually be onto the S-5, where you have a completely new series of missiles called the K-6. Now, the K-6 is the primary weapon of the S-5 ballistic missile submarine, which is more than 6,000 kilometers. I'm not privy to the ranges or anything, but it is a significantly larger missile than these K-15, K-4, and K-5. And the K-6 cannot be carried by the Arihant class simply because the diameter it's a fatter missile.
Right.
And longer range missile, 3-stage missile, and a very long range missile from what we hear. But that's, I believe, in development, and at some point in the possibly will enter testing by the end of this decade or maybe in the early part of the next decade. So I think once we get to a point where you have the K-5 inducted in numbers, equipping the Arihant class, and then of course you have the first unit of the of the S-5 out in the water, then you can have, then you can say that we will have arrived with our second strike deterrent capability. And then, CASD and all of that becomes really important.
Yeah, right. Just as a reference, so when you say 5,000 kilometers and in terms of missile range, would that give these submarines the ability to strike most of eastern China from the Bay of Bengal?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So the ideal thing is that all of these submarines, you would want to fire your missiles from the Bay of Bengal, not go far out, right? Not sail out into the Pacific or anything like that, because our threats are addressed by firing these missiles from within the Bay of Bengal. And the ultimate thing would be to fire them from, I'm not where in the Bay of Bengal, but somewhere in the Bay of Bengal where they would reach their intended targets, which are 2 nuclear armed adversaries that you should have the ability. I'm thinking aloud here that our nuclear deterrent should have the ability to target both our adversaries from one location in the Bay of Bengal.
Yeah. Right. Great, Sandeep. Couple of trivia questions as we end this episode. One specific to the Indian system of how we operate our nuclear weapons, and the other just generic about nuclear submarines in general. Who does the commander of the submarines report to? Is it the Navy chief, indirectly, obviously, or is it the commander of the Strategic Forces Command?
The Strategic Forces Command.
Right. Okay. So the Navy has nearly no day-to-day role in sort of these submarines, except the operational and the maintenance aspect of it.
It's just the operational maintenance.
Right. Interesting. The second one comes from one of my favorite movies, Crimson Tide. I don't know if you've watched it. Thriller. I think highly unrealistic, by the way, but I think you've got a sense of where I'm going with this. So explain in technology terms of how a command to fire a nuclear weapon is given to a submarine, considering the fact that these have to be extremely quiet, so they don't emit any waves to be detected by any radar. So how would that message be communicated? And is there ever a possibility of a Crimson Tide like thing happening where the commander of the ship has the final authority because the ship is not being able to communicate with the civilian command?
Well, second part of your question first, I hope we never get to that point, and it's just in the realm of, movie fiction. But, to answer your question, see, our ballistic missile captains, whoever they are, they're never seen or, they never come out in public. But I'm sure whoever they are would be...
Pretty sure you know them.
Sure.
And I've seen them, probably, pretty sure. Okay, silence. All right.
So whoever they are, they would be chosen through a battery of psychological tests to ensure that they don't crack under pressure. Because, when you are sailing, when you've sailed out with the ultimate weapon, and it is very different from all other vectors.
Yes.
In the sense, it's not like your rail-launched nuclear missile. It's not like your air-launched nuclear missile. It's certainly not like your land-launched transporter erector-launched missile, which are there in your control, and it's there on a surface. Whereas a nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, to again use the Crimson Tide analogy, is once he sails out, nobody knows where he is. He could be anywhere, right? Very few people in the command chain would know patrol areas. Now, patrol areas are extremely sensitive. Probably there would be as many people on the fingers of one hand who would know where the submarine would be or the patrol area is. There's very, very super secret locations. And what they do is that I am not privy to how our submarines operate, but if you look at the way the open literature suggests that in the American and the Russian case, for instance, what they do is they trail an ELF antenna. Okay. They come up to a certain depth and they trail a long antenna on the surface of the ocean, and that picks up ELF communication, extremely low frequency communication, very, very faint communication that goes out, which will be activated in case of a nuclear emergency, right? And there are special transmitters for this thing on the mainland. So if there was an emergency where you have a submarine out there, you would be able to communicate with the submerged submarine with your ELF communication, exactly like you saw in Crimson Tide.
Exactly.
There's no other way of doing it.
Yeah.
Not that we know of, at least. But that's how it's communicated. And once that communication is conveyed to the nuclear submarine, which is on patrol with nuclear weapons locked and loaded, then there would be a set of codes that would have to be... The codes would be relayed to him from the Strategic Forces Command. And the commander on board would then crack the codes, open the thing, and then initiate the launch sequence.
Right.
It's exactly there's no other way of doing it. It's exactly the way the other 5 P5 countries do it. And I don't believe that we would be any different from that.
Yeah, why reinvent the wheel? I guess the only the only unrealistic part in Crimson Tide, because they show actually much of this. The only unrealistic part is that they sort of lose communication because the antenna gets broken.
Yeah.
And the captain of the ship is going by the previous order.
Yeah, that's a plot device. That's a plot device. And yeah, it suits. I mean, it would be really boring if you just kind of fired off all the missiles. But there are movies like that, incidentally.
Yeah. And then he gets into a fight with the second in command over
Yes.
that. So it's a good watch, by the way.
It's a good watch, very entertaining. Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington, what's not to like about them?
Yeah. Final trivia point. Are these missiles mated? When I say mated, for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, it's widely believed that India, it's SIPRI report, the global body that tracks nuclear missile movements. They have said that in their annual reports that Indian missiles are never mated.
Right.
As in the warhead is not on the launcher. It's kept separate.
Right.
They would be mated only in times of an emergency or when you want to actually use them. But I don't think that's quite possible in a submarine, is it? Technology speaking.
It is possible, but then, if a submarine sails without the warheads being mated, then it is...
There's no point.
Then he's not on deterrent patrol. So the two words, most important words are deterrent patrol.
Yeah.
A deterrent patrol is what the Arihant did for the first time in 2018, I think it was. 2018?
Yeah, 2018, yes.
When the Arihant sailed out with its full load of nuclear weapons, that's 12 K-15s with their nuclear warheads. And there was a ceremony, there was a public release. The Prime Minister felicitated the Arihant crew. He got a cap from the captain of the Arihant. All that is public knowledge. But without nuclear weapons being mated onto the missiles, then it would not be a deterrent patrol, which then it would be just an ordinary, a sea sortie. It would be a submarine on a routine deployment without its thing. But a deterrent patrol is thing. And the thing is that, as secret as the Indian nuclear weapons program is and the strategic submarine program is, these are things we will never know.
Yeah.
So it's always that element of doubt that our planners put in the mind of whoever's watching, whether it's on mass media or it's those guys who are looking at the satellite imagery that they see, on the east coast of India.
Yeah, or those so-called survey vessels that are just looking at the fishes, in the Bay of Bengal.
Mapping the seabed.
Mapping the seabed. Right. Great, Sandeep. I think we'll end the episode there. A fantastic chat as always. And like I said, it was always a dream for me to discuss both the submarines with you, the nuclear-powered attack submarines and the nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines. And that's now done. So,
a few months from now, possibly early next year, I'm guessing March 2026 is when we possibly would see the Aridhaman, or
we might not see the
Aridhaman.
Exactly.
Yeah, we never. And that's the greatest thing about these subs. Before we wind up, Dave, is that the power that they have is being invisible.
Yeah.
The most terrifying image your adversary can actually see is when his satellite picks up a pass over your berths, your submarine pens, and he sees nothing there.
Yeah.
Which means they're all out.
Out at sea. Exactly. Yeah, right. Great. Thanks, Sandeep. As always, thanks so much.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
And thanks, as always, to our listeners and viewers. That's it for this week's Defense News. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and not cross any boundaries without a passport. Bye-bye.